Welcome back to the Single Malt Review. We're back in the wonderful world of cask strength single malt Scotch whisky.
The place we love to inhabit. And this one comes to us from the good people at Douglas Laing, who produce the Old Particular range, which is, well, to speak it plainly, it's a clone of the Old Malt Cask, which fell to the other side of the Laing split. Old Malt Cask brought to you by Hunter Laing, but Douglas Laing, who kept the original brand name, I suppose, had to find something else, and Old Particular was the bit they chose. So this is a wee bit different. Normal Old Particular, just like Old Malt Cask, is bottled at 50% so that they can, make a cask go a wee bit further. Old Particulars are normally bottled at something like 48 point something, I forget, some spurious nonsense strength that they've sort of settled on. This one is part of a new range that they're in the process of releasing. This is release number 1 of their The Elements collection, and they are to thusly represent the sort of old alchemical elements, so water, air, fire, and earth. This one representing fire, but the real difference here, beyond any marketing shtick, is that they are single casks and they are cask strength, so you get a wee bit more in the bottle. In this case, 54.3% ABV for a 12-year-old sherry butt matured whisky, of which they got 366 bottles out of which this is one. And representing fire, you'd think maybe they'd go, you'd think the obvious choice. What would your obvious choice be for a fire representing whisky? Where would it maybe come from?
Tough call. It is honestly, like heavily peated Islay is an obvious option,
That's
I think
the
of it more as
thing, yeah.
smoke. Peat, I don't think of heavily peated whisky as being fire. It is all about the vapours.
Well,
smoke.
I would have thought, the low-hanging fruit in that equation is Islay whiskey. But no, they haven't gone for that one. They've gone for what they describe as a heavily charred whisky. But, so we should be looking for maybe a bit more of a figurative fire than a literal one. So, and of course, Craigellachie, which exists primarily to confuse me on Glenallachie, which is the recently sort of zhuzhed up, reacquired one from the people that were behind the Benriach Distilling Company and Glendronach and so on, which is now doing very, very well for itself and evolving quite nicely. Craigellachie has nothing to do with it, unless you're in my brain, in which case I trip up on them all the time. Craigellachie is largely a blending malt, but it does have its own single release as a 13-year-old.
You'll otherwise most often find it in independent bottlings, I believe.
Yes,
I can't say
it
for
does
sure. I
show
think
up down
Signatory
there.
have done some outstanding and very old single cask Craigellachies in the past.
No, not one that's not one that is particularly protective of the name, so you will see it emerge now and then. So what has emerged from this bottle is a fairly richly coloured, so I'd say that's probably, if not a first fill, then a second. I think maybe you'd have to give your own opinion, but I think that looks like a second to me. That's not quite the inky darkness of a first fill from a sherry butt, but a second filling, certainly, not a third. A third would be much, much lighter. So we'll be looking for a good balance of spirit and wood characters, where a first fill would give us sort of super duper sherry bomb aspects. This one will be looking for a little bit more of a balance between the two competing factions of flavour there, the wood and the spirit.
And 54.3 is not a lightweight spirit,
No,
but it should still be entirely drinkable and appreciable at that.
Yes, it should. That's kind of tacking reasonably well for a 12-year-old dram, filled in at 63.3. That's fairly sort of natural evolution down the scale there. So not a particularly tight cast, not a leaker either, sort of a averagely performing one in terms of loss.
And that nose is already right on the cusp between resin and varnish.
Yeah, it is
solvents and lacquers.
It is a pretty unapologetically sherry matured whiskey. It is one of the old guard, really, of the sherry matured ones here. It is.
Sorry, I would actually blanked from 5 minutes ago. What's our region? Craigellachie?
Craigellachie, that's a good question. Craigellachie, I believe it is not going to Tell me. So that was a bit of essential research we didn't do.
Yeah.
It's either Highlands or Speyside.
Perhaps on
I
the
suspect
bottle,
Highlands.
the tube, I mean.
The tube. I suspect that the old particular may be of a mind that if you have to ask, the mistake is yours.
Yes. I feel I have to ask, so if I can tell you a very
It'll
brief
no
jump cut.
it'll appear on the screen.
Oh, good.
It'll appear on the screen. We've already figured it out.
Yes.
In the future, Dr. Watt, Meme Lord, at your service. Anyway, back to the whiskey before we completely lose cohesion here. This is, as I say, it is kind of a old school sherry matured whiskey to the point where I would even hazard that this is maybe even European oak. So many what's called sherry casks now are simply American oak that's had a bit of a rinse and a shake over
Seasoned
in
in
Spain.
sherry.
Yeah,
Wow,
seasoned is the
right.
new word, and they're immediately taken apart, shipped across. This one has the slightly darker tannins, slightly drier, and absence of the really aggressive vanilla and coconut, which makes me think this is genuine European oak sherry wood. So we'll go in with that stipulation. That's my bet on this one. So on the nose we've got all the sherry characters all the usual suspects, I suppose. We've got lots of nice ginger and gingerbread as well, because there's some nice sugary characters mixed up with that one. The honey is there, but it's quite darker. We call it bush honey over here, but you might call it, I don't know, Viper's Bugloss or whatever the sort of darker, slightly more, herbaceous tannic honey is.
Less refined, a few more different species of wildflowers.
A few bee parts left in the bottle, the good stuff. You know what you're after. Yeah, it's a drier, darker, more tannic, woodier nose than you'd get.
Actually, a bit of dust, a bit of fresh hay in that aroma too. Did one season of hay baling in my youth.
Goodness, that's extremely New Zealand.
It was in a very small farm, so admittedly it was only a few days, but a fresh bale of hay, as well as being a hay fever sufferer's abject nightmare. It is an unforgettable sensory experience in other respects, including the aroma, of which there is a hint in this dram.
Very good, very good. I'm trying to mine a little bit deeper here. I wish I knew what the Craigellachie profile was, but I don't. It's just such an uncommon malt. I've never had. This is the first straight Craigellachie, to my knowledge at least, that we have tasted on the channel. So we're going in a little bit blind in terms of what its distillery character is. But as I say, it's made for blending, so it's not going to have any huge swings either way. Anyway, let's see what it's like at full strength. Oh, that's not bad.
That has got a curiously bitter note to it.
That's that wood tannin.
Yeah.
That European wood tannin is. It's got that black tea almost thing to it. Yeah, it really diverges from American versus European sherry, seasoned or otherwise, oak.
Even a hint of the struggling to describe it, but I'm thinking celery, a kind of slightly bitter, crisp green vegetable property.
I think we have different relationships with celery.
Quite likely.
Celery to me is like almost a salty kind of a vegetable. I don't know. Can't say I'm getting that one in there.
Fair enough.
It is a very
one property among many, though.
It's a very deeply wooden kind of a whiskey, and it is bittersweet. There is quite a lot of oak tannins, and tannins are bitter compounds.
Yeah, there's green and black tea creeping through at the edges.
And a lot of charcoal. They weren't kidding around with the fact that this was a heavily charred barrel, and it kind of come through. It's a bitter, real carbonaceous charcoal, and it does indeed bring to mind, maybe not something literally ablaze, but say an old campsite kind of a thing. It does represent. There is an element of fire here, which is interesting, given that this is the way they went with it, rather than going, as I said, the really obvious choice would be just find something super peated and run with it. I suspect we'll see a bit more with the addition of water.
That has gone immediately into the, at first nosing, the dank tinned vegetables avenue, which is not a great transformation.
Vegetables or fruit?
Veggies.
Oh no.
Peas, asparagus. Not the full-on tainted funk of tinned asparagus, but that slightly mushy beans and peas out of a can.
Because I'm getting some tinned fruit, which is not. It's a fairly typical mature Highland character from Sherrywood, especially, but there is a bit of a metallic twang in there.
It may just need more time to breathe. I mean, and of course it'll taste different throughout it smells.
And you can see that clouding up immediately as well. So there's a lot of extra sort of goodies in there on the molecular level. And goodness me, hang on. That water has done marvellous things to the flavour there. There is a tremendous red fruitiness now.
I don't think I overwatered it, but for me it's pushed it into the dank and mushy end of a flavour spectrum.
It is certainly, it's an overripe kind of a fruit. It's a stewed, macerated fruit. So
browned apples and old bananas.
Imagine cooked plums, like cooked plums, cooked red fruits, currants.
I do a decent stewed plum, but it does not taste anything like this.
It's falling on the other side.
Yes. I don't think I added too much water. I think it's still within sensible margins here, but it is transformed in not a great way.
It could be a whiskey that's a whiskey of two parts.
However, just to see if I did in fact overwater
give it a boost.
Yeah, so just top up just a smidge.
See, this is always where it gets exciting, where it treats different people different ways. Yeah. It's not every whiskey we get this, but sometimes we get this real divergence of palate.
Because if everyone agreed on everything all the time, it would be extremely boring and we would be basically pointless.
Well, it more draws a light on the fact that people's palates are not created equally. Some person will taste something in a completely different light to another, and that there's many factors. Some of them is straight genetic, but a lot of it is flavours you were exposed to as you were growing up. Is a really big. Your taste memory is attuned largely as a growing human being. So from the ages of 0 to 18 is when your palate is really kind of set, which is, I think, extremely unfair because that's when you're not supposed to be drinking whiskey. So if they here's a whiskey hack for you. If you want to produce the next super whiskey nose, get in early. Get them, just give them little bits, but starting from 3 years old, and they will be the next super nose. Because otherwise you've got to cobble it together from flavours you've otherwise been exposed to, and that can differ wildly, especially if you're some parts of the world regards to others. You might have completely different. We're lucky that we're both from the same part of the globe, so that the at least the range of things we were exposed to is largely a facsimile of
It's a good variety of sensory experience. Growing up is a good way to have a good broad palate. I mean, after all, we're from the same country, but wildly different parts of it. You're from down here in the south. I am from one of the northern cities, which is famed for its constant and sometimes worrying geothermal activity. I grew up in a fog of hydrogen sulfide and other sulfurous volcanic gases. So
as I am one with the wheat field. Dave is down with the funk. It's all very different.
Yeah.
But I fear we are diverging.
We're diverging a little, yes. So this has been improved somewhat by adding a little more of the whiskey back into the glass, bringing the strength up slightly. That's brought in some fresh fruit characters, some peaches, apricots, and some fresh plum. Bit of sharpness, which it needed after that dulling softness and the metallic fug that was introduced by the addition of probably, in hindsight, a little too much water. So it's a precarious whiskey. It's balanced on a bit of a knife edge.
Pretty optimal drinking strength.
You've got to pipette in drop by drop till it becomes just right, which is a shame. A whiskey shouldn't be a finicky precision titration experiment. It should be something you can eyeball, you can just get in there and just enjoy it.
At this age, certainly. I mean, the older whiskey gets, the more fragile it becomes. But 12 years old, that should be a fairly robust, rough and tumble age, especially for a single cask whiskey. I think the fragility to this one comes from the what I'm still convinced is a second fill of the sherry,
Right.
but the wood is just leaning on just a hair between spirit driven and oak driven in this particular whiskey. The next fill is going to be a completely spirit driven sherry whiskey if they bottle another single cask. But this one, the two sort of sides are not in competition, but they are very finely balanced between each other, which makes it a slightly curlier dram than you might otherwise get. But for me, I really rather like it. As to how much it has to do with fire, that's up to personal opinion. I'm not going to necessarily judge it on its entry ticket there. But as a whiskey, as a sherry matured, old school kind of a whiskey, I think it's really pretty good. It's an 88 from me. What do you think?
Well, this is very good in its straight up undiluted cask strength form. I think it suffers a bit from the addition of water. Obviously, we differ on that point, which is fine. We have a different take on it. It rates an 86 from me. It is good. It's enjoyable. It's good to have a Craigellachie. Sorry, this Craigellachie. Yes,
It is. It almost got you too.
It did too. I was thinking
it's an ever-present
danger.
danger.
The seeds of doubt in my mind, but no, yeah, of course. And it is a good to have a chance to try another whiskey, especially when you don't find very often in its full raw form. So yeah, decent scores. It does suffer from adding water. It's not as adaptable to different tastes, sadly. But however, I am still looking forward to the other elements in the series. So we've got fire to start with.
I will attempt, I say, to keep up with these.
Yeah.
Assuming the price doesn't balloon entirely out of control.
And see if we can eventually one day assemble the complete Old Particular Captain Planet.
Yeah. By their powers combined.
If we haven't horribly shown our age via that arcane reference to the 1980s/90s.
Oh, I'm sure it was 90s so much.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Anyway.
Nonetheless.
We are going to come back around to, I think it might be time for a break. We're going to have something a little lower ABV. We're going to refresh. We're going to centre. And we're going to be right back. So, Slandra, we will be right back. And catch us then for, it might not even be a spirit. Buckle up.